The officer at the police station had clearly heard some version of this story before. Still, he let her tell all of it. The spilled coffees, the 6 months, the apartment key, the flowers, the promise to be back in 30 minutes. The 30 minutes that never ended. When she finished, he asked only one question. Did anyone else know how much you had saved? Sarah thought for a moment. My bank. My parents. And Daniel. The officer wrote something in his notebook before looking back up. We'll freeze what we can, he said. But I want you to prepare yourself. He paused. This may have been planned from the beginning. The words landed harder than the missing money. Because if he was right, none of it had been real. Not the phone calls. Not the flowers. Not the quiet moments on the balcony. Not the man who remembered every little thing she'd ever told him. She drove home replaying every memory, searching for cracks she'd somehow missed. It hurt in a way that had nothing to do with the money. It was the kind of pain that makes you revisit a happy memory just to see if it still feels the same. It never does. Over the next few days, everything Daniel had told her unraveled the moment anyone tried to verify it. The apartment, he'd given her a key to belong to someone else. Someone who had never heard his name. The company he claimed to work for had no record of him. His driver's license turned out to be fake. She stopped sleeping. On the third night, lying awake in the dark, one memory refused to leave her alone. Her banking app. The lockout. Let me fix it. He'd taken her phone. 2 minutes later, he'd handed it back with a smile. At the time, it had seemed completely ordinary. Now it was the only thing she could think about. 6 years as a financial analyst had taught her one lesson above all else. Clean stories deserved more suspicion than messy ones. A man as careful and convincing as Daniel wouldn't normally leave behind a fake driver's license that unraveled after a single phone call. Something about it didn't fit. And when the story doesn't add up, you check the numbers yourself. At 2 in the morning, she opened her laptop. She downloaded her bank statements, compared login timestamps, traced every transaction she could access, not because she expected to find answers, because she needed to see the story stop making sense with her own eyes instead of hearing someone else tell her it didn't. A week later, the detective called. I've got something, he said. Her stomach tightened. We traced the transfer. She gripped the phone. It didn't go overseas. She frowned. Then where did it go? There was a brief silence. It went into another account. What account? One under your name. Sarah let out a short, disbelieving laugh. I don't have another account. We know. The detective replied quietly. That's the problem. At the bank, the manager pulled up the records without much ceremony. There it is. Sarah stared at the screen. An account. In her name. Opened 4 months earlier. A full month before she'd even given Daniel a spare key. Someone had stolen her identity long before she'd ever had a reason to suspect him. Long before she'd started looking over her shoulder. One question refused to leave her alone. If Daniel had wanted her money, why move it into an account with her own name? Why not transfer it somewhere anonymous and disappear? That wasn't how thieves operated. It was how someone acted when they were trying to keep something from disappearing. She hated the thought the moment it crossed her mind, because it meant there was still a part of Daniel she didn't understand. And maybe, a part she'd judged too quickly. 2 days later, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Instead, she answered. If you want to know the truth, a man's voice said, go to locker 27. The line went dead. She stared at the phone for several seconds before lowering it. No explanation. No warning. No chance to ask who he was. She almost didn't go. Every instinct told her this was exactly the kind of trap people walked into because they wanted answers badly enough to ignore common sense. She sat in her car for nearly 20 minutes, keys still in the ignition. Then another thought crept in. If Daniel had known, even weeks earlier, that his time might suddenly run out, he would have needed a way to reach her without contacting her directly. A message through someone else. A drop point instead of a meeting. It wasn't proof, but it made just enough sense that she couldn't ignore it. She started the engine. The station lockers sat along a quiet hallway, their metal doors scratched from years of use. She found number 27. Her hand lingered on the latch for a moment before she pulled it open. Inside were only two things: a flash drive and a sealed envelope. She didn't need to open it to recognize the handwriting. Daniel, or whatever his real name was. Her chest tightened. For the first time since he'd vanished, he no longer felt completely gone. He'd expected this moment. He'd planned for it, which meant whatever had happened, it hadn't happened by accident. She picked up the envelope carefully, almost afraid to disturb it. For several long seconds, she simply stood there, holding it. Then she slipped both items into her bag and walked back to her car. She still couldn't bring herself to open the letter. Not yet. That evening, she called Maya, mostly because she didn't know who else to call. "You were right," Sarah said quietly. "About all of it." There was a long pause. Maya never said "I told you so." Instead, she asked one question. "Are you okay?" Sarah looked down at the envelope resting on her lap. "I don't know. I wasn't trying to be right," Maya said softly. "I just didn't want you to find out you were facing this alone." The words settled over Sarah in silence. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Maya simply stayed on the line. Quiet. Patient. Strangely, it reminded Sarah of Daniel. Of the way he'd sit through her worst days without trying to fix them. Just listening. When the call ended, the apartment felt impossibly still. The envelope was still in her lap. Waiting. She turned it over once. Ran a thumb along the edge. Then, taking a slow breath, she opened it. The first line stopped her cold. "Sarah, if you're reading this,